This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Tunisia's parliament approves a new government in a confidence vote that also forestalls a fresh election. Italy's foreign minister meets Libya rivals in latest effort to end the raging conflict. The UN calls for probe into threats against a doctor known for campaigning against Eastern DRC atrocities. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. In business, white farmers in Zimbabwe to get back their land in a new government restitution program. And in sports, we take a look at the increasing popularity of Teqball in South Africa. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's begin in Tunisia, where lawmakers have approved the country's new cabinet, effectively avoiding a fresh election. A total of 134 deputies voted in favor, while 67 voted against forming the government. Composed of 28 members with 25 ministers and their secretaries of state, it is dominated by independent technocrats. It is led by Prime Minister-designate Mukwege. The formation sparked anger among many political parties, calling for a political government reflecting the balance of forces in parliament. President Kais Saied assigned Mukwege to form a new government in July. This is after Elias Fakfak resigned from the post over allegations of a conflict of interest. Tunisia's hope for the government can now focus on tackling worsening economic and social problems. This will be Tunisia's third government since October and the ninth since 2011. And Mauritius authorities say they've recovered the body of a third member of a cleanup crew involved in a collision between a tugboat and a barge. The two vessels were involved in a salvage operation, including the containment of oil leaking from the shipwrecked MV Wakashio, and when the incident happened. Following the crash, water started filling the tugboat and crew members jumped into life rafts, which then overturned. 2 of them were found dead during the rescue operations, while 4 others were saved out of the 8 who were on board. Authorities say bad weather is to blame for the incident. The accident and subsequent deaths are the latest in a string of tragedies that are part of the Wakashio oil spill. In addition to the environment catastrophe that is still being assessed, at least 40 dolphins in the region were found dead, sparking further anger over the handling of the incident. The Japanese bulk carrier struck a coral reef in July, spilling some 1,000 tons of crude oil into the sea, which affected nature reserves in the surrounding area.
There was a terrible accident last night in very bad weather where a tugboat has sunk with 8 crew on board. We have 4 of the crew are safe and recovering in hospital, but 4 are missing or presumed or dead. So the priority now is to find the 2 remaining bodies or the 2 remaining persons which are still missing. And we are here firstly to ask for volunteers so that people can go out in their boats and in the lagoon itself try to find, maybe identify or find the body.
Well, a month after the oil spill, experts are now turning their attention to the cleaning of the mangroves. This is the most challenging task yet. As CGTN's Lufefe reports the full extent of damage from the country's worst environmental disaster, and it's still being assessed. However, the island residents are protesting alleged poor handling of the oil spill by the government.
Mangroves are one of the most important ecosystems in Mauritius. They protect the shores from powerful waves, prevent erosion, and provide habitats and nursery grounds for crabs, birds, insects, and juvenile fish. Today, the largest concentration of mangroves in Mauritius can be found along the east and southeast coasts. But in a tragic twist of fate, this is virtually the same area that's been affected by the Wakashio oil spill.
When the oil spill from Wakashio happened, a lot of the oil initially that came out went and deposited itself in some of the mangrove areas. So it tends to coat the roots, and then it also coats the soil down. Mangroves have different mechanisms. They have organs called lenticels that are found on the roots and some part of the mangroves. So if this is covered with the oil spill, the mangrove will not be able to carry out respiration, and at some point they will die eventually.
Matthew Somerville from the United Nations is among the international experts leading the cleanup.
A lot of the liquid oil, the mobile oil, has been removed rapidly. In places like where we're standing here, there was lots of local people working here recovering oil. Some of the waste you see around us now is going to be removed. It's difficult to get out of this location. And then they'll start on the second stage of cleaning the mangroves. Carefully, locally trained teams working through the area.
Wakashio's insurer has appointed international contractors to train locals for ongoing cleanup efforts.
We are now doing the coastal cleaning with local partners. First, we are removing all the accumulated solid waste in the area like leaves and seaweed drenched in oil. Then we will gently flash wash the mangroves with large amounts of low-pressure water. The locals working with us are very motivated. But it's manual work. It's slow and tedious.
According to government estimates, about 32 kilometers of the shoreline has been oiled to various degrees. The question on everyone's mind is, will this mess ever be cleaned up properly? And if so, when?
It'll never be able to get back 100% because it's been affected. But the effort will be in letting nature bring it back, so it's in a natural balance. It'll take some time, but that time is the best way. Human intervention will make it take longer.
Experts do agree that when the mangroves recover, the lagoons will come back to life. But more needs to be done to comprehensively conserve these coastal forests.
So most of the mangroves in the region has been highly impacted due to human activities, that is clearing of the mangroves to make for development, and also in terms of dumping of certain waste that has been quite recurrent in this region. After the cleaning, which is a thorough process, we need to come up with restoration programs of mangroves. So for them to regenerate by their own is going to be hard.
According to the government, there's no evidence of mangrove death, but the long-term impact of the Wakashio's oil spill will need ongoing monitoring and assessment.
Cleaning up these mangroves from the effects of the Wakashio oil spill is extremely complicated, and if not done right, could cause more harm to these fragile marine habitats. Also known as guardians of the coast, these mangroves are now in need of help and protection themselves, and it's going to take the collaborative effort of the government, the international experts, the locals, and even Mother Nature herself to restore and reinvigorate these critical ecosystems. Liu Feifei, CGTN, Point Jerome, Mauritius.
Italy's chief diplomat has visited Libya to reaffirm support for an end to the country's civil war following ceasefire initiatives by the UN-supported government and rival parliament. Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio met with Fayez Sarraj, head of the Government of National Accord based in the capital Tripoli. He then headed to eastern Libya to meet with Aguila Saleh, Speaker of the rival Tobruk-based House of Representatives. Sarraj's office says they have discussed points of agreement with the rival government on implementing a permanent ceasefire, as well as the demilitarization of the city of Sirte and the nearby area of Jafra. The latest call for a truce was announced in late August. Previous efforts to secure lasting peace have been unsuccessful. The United Nations has called for an independent investigation into death threats made against a Congolese doctor. Dr. Denis Mukwege won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 for treating rape victims in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He has received threats for his outspoken criticism of atrocities committed in eastern DRC. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more from Kinshasa.
It is believed that the life of DRC's Nobel laureate Dr. Denis Mukwege is in danger after he condemned the killing of Congolese civilians by gunmen said to belong to the Banyamulenge ethnic group in a village called Kipupu in South Kivu province last month.
So Dr. Mukwege, right after the massacre, published a tweet. And after this tweet, he has received a lot of threats. And even his family received that message in private, directly on phones, family phones, on social network, in the media.
A staunch defender of human rights, Dr. Mukwege has treated survivors of sexual violence in the conflict zones of eastern DRC for over a decade. His criticism of last month's killings appears to have led to the latest threats on his life. According to the UN, more than 1,000 Congolese have been killed in conflicts in eastern DRC, and over 1 million have been displaced this year.
The reason why Dr. Mukwege is threatened is because he's saying inconvenient truth. And when we talk about justice, it's very important, because the reason why all those persons allow themselves to attack, to make some massacres, it is because we are in a country where there is impunity.
It's not the first time Dr. Mukwege's life has been threatened. In 2012, he survived an assassination attempt, which was followed by more threats in the following years. The UN has now called for an impartial investigation into these latest threats. Right now, it's unclear who's behind them. Many Congolese citizens have condemned the threats made against the Nobel laureate and called on their government to ensure his safety.
That situation is deplorable. Dr. Mukwege is a great leader of the people of South Kivu province, the DRC, and humanity as a whole. How can someone wake up one morning and threaten him because he's calling for justice for victims of massacres in our country? We condemn it in the strongest terms possible.
Dr. Mukwege won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 for his efforts to end the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. He has urged the European Parliament to establish an international criminal tribunal in the DRC to hold perpetrators of massacres accountable. Dr. Mukwege is currently living in the eastern DRC city of Bukavu without adequate protection from Congolese troops.
Chris Ochemringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has wrapped up a week-long tour of Europe. His last stop was Berlin, where he stressed the value of working together with Europe on global issues. Mark Webster has more from the German capital.
The Chinese Foreign Minister arrived for talks on the last leg of his five-nation European visit to show how much Beijing valued its relationship with the EU, and that even if there were difference of opinion on issues, that should not stand in the way of even closer economic ties. Certainly both men seemed broadly in step as they arrived for their press conference, though there was a small diplomatic hiccup as to which podium was their own. Once that slip was sorted, Heiko Maas suggested there was still far more uniting the two countries than dividing them.
A decoupling of the relationship between the European Union and China is not in our interest. It is in nobody's interest, both politically and economically. There are many reasons for better cooperation, which is one of the motives for continuing to work towards a comprehensive EU-China agreement during our Council presidency.
For his part, Foreign Minister Wang Yi suggested a far-reaching agreement between the EU and China on investment could be completed on schedule by the end of this year.
We must maintain the overall situation of China-EU relations and properly manage any differences. We will agree to the positioning of a China-EU strategic partnership and must grasp the most important aspects of China-EU development.
While the United States was never actually mentioned by name, both sides have made it clear they want to forge a relationship based on their own priorities, irrespective of what hostile commentary is coming from Washington. What's more, European countries have indicated they won't take sides in what some have suggested could become a new Cold War. At the same time, neither will be thrown off course when it comes to negotiating a comprehensive investment agreement, ideally by the end of this year. Before the pandemic, trade between the EU and China was growing steadily. Germany and China alone traded more than $250 billion a year in goods and services. A new framework could enhance that considerably. The Chinese foreign ministers' week of meetings in Europe, from Italy to Norway, the Netherlands and France, were all designed to shore up the relationship at a challenging time globally. It seems from the cautious but friendly reception he has received at each stop that he has broadly succeeded in that objective. Now, as he leaves to return to Beijing, the German Foreign Ministry believes it will be important for all sides to continue that détente and prove that the close collaboration seen during the response to COVID-19 can be matched in other areas. Mark Webster, CGTN, Berlin.
You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. The news continues. Here's a look at what's ahead. Black Lives Matter protests continue 100 days since the killing of George Floyd. Technology brings medical care to homes in Kenya amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The trial of the 2015 deadly attacks by Islamist extremists on Charlie Hebdo magazine has started in Paris. It involves 14 people who allegedly provided the now dead gunman with financial aid and material support. The attack, which targeted the satirical magazine and a Jewish store, killed 17 people. Al-Qaeda's Yemen branch placed Charlie Hebdo's then director on its wanted list after the weekly published cartoons of Prophet Muhammad, including one showing him in a bomb-shaped turban. The magazine has republished the cartoons to coincide with the trial. Well, today marks 100 days since George Floyd was killed in police custody, and protests sparked by the death show little signs of easing. Timothy Ulrich reports.
Black Lives Matter protesters continue to face off with police, this time in Los Angeles. Monday afternoon, officers shot and killed Dijon Kizzy, a 29-year-old black man. Police say they stopped him for riding his bicycle in violation of vehicle codes, leading to the man's death.
Our suspect was holding some items of clothing in his hands, punched one of the officers in the face, and then dropped the items in his hands. The deputies noticed that inside the clothing items that he dropped was a black semi-automatic handgun.
Kizzy's family say the officers fired over 20 shots into his back as a result. Hundreds gathered outside the LA Sheriff's Department over the shooting. And in Portland, protesters on Monday called for the city's mayor, Ted Wheeler, to leave office over his handling of the unrest.
Last night, 100 cops arrested 29 peaceful protesters. Meanwhile, down the street from my house, a black family's house was shot up, and they didn't have cops there for 17 hours because he's so busy arresting people like me, peaceful protesters.
There have been almost 100 consecutive days of demonstrations in Portland. Tensions have been escalating between protesters and Trump supporters following the shooting of a member of a local far-right group over the weekend. Yet another flashpoint in the country's growing divide. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
U.S. President Donald Trump has visited Kenosha, Wisconsin, a city rocked by protests after a police shooting. Trump again pressed his law and order campaign message as he toured damaged businesses and met with law enforcement officers. But he did not meet with the family of Jacob Blake, the black man shot and wounded by police. Dan Williams reports from Kenosha.
A group of US President Trump supporters lined the roads near the courthouse in anticipation of his trip here. There they were met by a couple of dozen Black Lives Matter protesters. The city has been the focal point of racial tension since police shot Jacob Blake, an unarmed black man, multiple times last week, something some Trump supporters had little time for.
When the police say stop, you stop. What? There's nothing to say. He didn't stop. He was shot. I can't help it.
The Black Lives Matter protesters, though, were keen to offer the president a different view.
Now he needs to see how many people is with him and how many people are actually against him, you know what I mean? And he needs to know what he's been doing is completely wrong.
Trump surveyed areas damaged by the protesters for himself. He committed to providing resources for the city as well as businesses impacted by the violence. And he had little time for the protesters.
These are not acts of peaceful protest, but really domestic terror. My administration coordinated with the state and local authorities to very, very swiftly deploy the National Guard, surge federal law enforcement to Kenosha and stop the violence.
Trump did not meet with family members of Jacob Blake. Some of the Blake family members took part in a Justice for Jacob community event. Their message to Trump remains clear. They want justice for Blake, who remains paralyzed and hospitalized.
And I'm sucking up all the pain we have just to stand on our square until we get justice for little Jake, which means we get an indictment and a conviction of the man who shot him 7 times in the back.
There had been fears that President Trump's visit here would further stoke tensions. Although the day passed largely without incident, the hurt, the pain and the anger remain. The city, like many across the US, it would appear, remain as divided as ever. Dan Williams for CGTN, Kenosha, Wisconsin.
And to Kenya now, where an e-health startup has come up with a digital platform which takes care of patients directly from the comfort of their homes in Nairobi. Tibu Health decentralizes primary outpatient care and is helping people stay safe during the COVID-19 outbreak. Let's take a look.
This smartphone app is helping patients get the treatment they need while maintaining social distancing. From $10 for a consultation fee, they can receive the services of a doctor within 20 to 30 minutes after request.
It gives me an opportunity to avoid the risk of going to the hospital and making long queues, remembering that my age is that risky age where we are not supposed to go where there are so many people. And therefore, I find it very, very convenient for me and to avoid getting these COVID.
We take the doctor, the clinic, and the lab, and we bring it directly to the patient wherever they are.
In collaboration with Lancet Kenya, Tibu also conducts COVID-19 tests at a cost of $110 at home. The results are then sent via email to the patient. The platform is particularly relevant during the coronavirus pandemic, a time when many vulnerable people would prefer to stay at their homes and avoid hospitals.
So in this time of the COVID pandemic, there's 50 to 60% decrease in visits to clinics and hospitals. So we're a strategic solution where we are able to deliver the healthcare services to people and keep them out of those locations. And they're worried to go to those locations for exposure to COVID, so they prefer to stay home and safe.
Launched in May, patients can request medical assistance, after which they get paired up with the closest doctor. The medical practitioner then heads to their homes, depending on the level of urgency.
For us, it's extremely relevant that we can bring the healthcare services to the patient, keep them safe, keep them comfy at home. It's very private. All of the data that is collected is encrypted. It's not stored on the patient's phone. It all gets shot up to our servers. So now the patients have access to all of their medical records on demand, which is an extremely powerful follow-up tool in the healthcare continuum.
The app currently has 2,300 users within Nairobi, as Kenyans continue to embrace technology in the healthcare industry. Chao Muhono, CGTN.
In Zimbabwe, some citizens have turned to art to deal with the ongoing pandemic. One bus conductor has returned to his love of wirecraft. Not only has Bernard Samuel rediscovered the art form, he also teaches children in his neighborhood to make their own wire art.
23 kilometers outside of Harare, a bus conductor has returned to his artistic roots. Bernard Emmanuel has always had a love for wirecraft art. Now he's sharing his skill set with his young neighbors.
There are some here who are quite talented, and this will help them in their future to escape social challenges like drug abuse caused by idleness.
Parents in the neighborhood appreciate Bernard for giving their children a much-needed break.
We are so happy with the work Bernard is doing with our kids. It helps them to refresh their minds after online lessons.
While he may have worked as a bus conductor, the pandemic has spurred new career ambitions for Bernard.
My vision is to go to a bigger place. Then I will get proper materials to create good products, which I can sell for good prices at the market.
As he works towards his dream, Bernard will still have his young students to impart his knowledge onto. Astatal, CGTN.
And we will see you on the other side of the break with our business news. Here's a look at the headline. White farmers in Zimbabwe to get back their land in a new government restitution program.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to Africa Live. White farmers settled in Zimbabwe whose land was seized under Robert Mugabe can now apply to get it back and will be offered land elsewhere if restitution proves impractical. Last month, Zimbabwe agreed to pay $3.5 billion in compensation to local white farmers whose land was forcibly taken by the government to resettle black families. This moves a step closer to resolving one of the most divisive policies of the Robert Mugabe era. Under Zimbabwean laws passed during a short period of opposition government, but ignored by Mugabe, foreign white farmers protected by treaties between their governments and Zimbabwe should be compensated for both land and other assets. Egypt's phone manufacturers are expecting a boom in tablet and smartphone sales when schools begin the new academic year in October. With the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ministry of Education has adopted an online learning system, and students will need to have proper equipment like smartphones, laptops, and tablets. CGTN's Yasser Hakim looks at the impact online education is expected to have on the sales of smart technology gadgets.
An estimated 23,500,000 students in Egypt are getting ready to return to school for the new academic year, and certain procedures have been put in place to reduce the chances of a COVID outbreak among students, with schools embracing the use of technology.
First, the students from kindergarten to year 3 will go to school every day, but with 50% capacity in classes. From year 4 to 6, they will go 4 days. From year 7 to 9, they will only go for 3 days and work online the rest of the week. In high school, they will depend on the tablet in all their work.
Parents have their say about the new system, which the Ministry of Education carried out a trial over the last few months in the previous academic year.
I personally support online education. It has made life easier and is more practical. I wish they adopt it in everything, not just education. The new generations are already experts on the internet and have been using smartphones and laptops from a young age.
I told my children this is a good idea. The country is developing and using the latest technology, and we should be on the same track.
Electronic and mobile shops have already started feeling the effects of online education as a surge is experienced in IT-related projects.
Yes, sales increased when the online education was adopted. Students were forced to look for new equipment. They wanted multifunctional equipment that support Android applications like Zoom, and which are also smartphones with SIM cards as well. The highest demand is for the latest brand of smartphones.
But not all students can afford the smartphones or tabs, and the government will have to chip in to make the system work efficiently.
The Ministry of Education is expected to hand out 650 tablets to students from Year 3 to high school. It will gradually increase to reach 1,850,000 tablets in the next 3 years. This means a boom in tablet sales.
This is a new experience for Egypt. Most experts say the success or failure cannot be measured in a few months. It will need 3 years to determine if online education is the right solution or not. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
A number of South African state companies have requested billions of dollars in funding from the government to help them weather the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. According to a presentation by the Finance Ministry, South African Post Office has requested $293 million in support. State broadcaster SABC, in the meantime, is seeking $89.9 million, while airports company ACSA has applied for an equity injection of $209 million. The presentation also shows that ailing power utility Eskom's financial performance was worse than budgeted for as a result of limited economic activity during the pandemic, and arms firm Denel faced the risk of entering bankruptcy protection or being liquidated. Tunisia's industrial production fell 18.2% in the second quarter of 2020. The decline is due to COVID-19 related disruptions and associated lockdown measures that have slowed down investments and held back factories' output. From Tunis, here is CGTN's Adnan Shawashi with the details.
Tunisia is hoping to rebound from the second quarter contraction after authorities asserted that the COVID-19 crisis slowed production in the North African state. The nation's industrialization minister declared that the decline hit several sectors, especially the production of textile, clothing and leather, as well as building materials, ceramics and glass sector.
Diverse industries were affected, such as the mechanical and electrical engineering industries, paper and paperboard, wood industry and the rubber and plastic industries.
The Director General of the Agency for the Promotion of Industry explained that Tunisia is not excluded from the impact of the global economic crisis, which is the result of the sudden interruption of the industrial production cycle in the whole world.
The pandemic has not spared any industrial sector in the country. Our main markets and clients were affected. The crisis hit the production, the global supply chain, as well as the strategic plans of all world economies. We used to talk about delocalization. Now many countries are promoting relocalization of production in the post-COVID-19 period. This will complicate the economic situation even further.
The output in the mining sector also fell 21.6% in the same period. In fact, the production of raw phosphate declined to 842,000 tons in the second quarter of 2020 against 980,000 tons in the same period of 2019. The Minister of Energy and Mines said that the economic recovery plan depends on the resumption of phosphate and hydrocarbon activity, which caused significant shortfalls in earnings this year.
The low output in the mining basin has many negative repercussions. Phosphate is one of the pillars of the economy. The production is down, so are the revenues due to the pandemic. When the phosphate sector is in crisis, many parallel activities are impacted.
The governor of the Central Bank of Tunisia stressed the need to adjust the structural weaknesses of the country's economy by strengthening structural reforms in the aftermath of the coronavirus crisis. According to the National Institute of Statistics, the industrial production was deeply affected by the pandemic. The state imposed a 2-month general lockdown and confinement, which paralyzed over 3,000 factories in dozens of industrial areas across the country. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And we are not done just yet. The news continues on Africa Live. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
And a mile away from my house, they stopped me, handed me over a gun and asked me to kill my whole family and all of those people.
We were always waiting for being killed every day.
I realized personally that the international community was not going to intervene.
La vie était très dure, c'est vrai, parce que, bon, pour nous, on s'était séparés de nos familles.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back, and now to our digital safari series where we bring you the latest of the wildebeest migration at Kenya's Maasai Mara. Today we highlight zebra and buffalo herds leisurely nibbling at the lush, sprawling grasslands. Let's take a look.
Yesterday on CGTN's Digital Safari. In the Maasai Mara, with the sun shining and the blue skies above, many of the animals took the opportunity to bathe in the sun's warmth. The North Clan were scurrying back to their den, not before indulging in a decrepit old carcass, crushing the overlooked bones with their powerful jaws. The massive zebra and buffalo herd of the Mara leisurely nibbled at the lush, sprawling grasslands, while the cattle egret stuck close by, latching onto any fleeing insect disturbed by the herds. An exceptionally pink male ostrich was preening himself nearby, making sure he looked his best in the midst of the breeding season. David discovered an elephant calf with a curious limp. Unsure as to what caused this, we hope that the little one has a speedy recovery. Down in a blustery South Africa, the frigid winds and icy rain sent most of the wildlife seeking shelter, except for a few white-backed vultures in Pride Lands who braved the winds to discuss their plans for the day. A black-backed jackal also sought refuge from the prevailing winds. Over in Swalu, the winds continued, but the temperature increased, bringing out many kudu and giraffe still sheltered by the thick bush. Even the rock-star meerkat surfaced to see if the winds had dissipated. In Pinda, the mountain pride was getting a late start to their morning. As the cubs tussled and played with each other, working on their hunting skills for later, the moms of the pride tried to catch a few more minutes of sleep. Eventually, everyone settled down for a quick cat nap. Join us every day at 4:30 GMT on CGTN digital platforms for your very own virtual safari through the African wild.
And on to our new series called Jambo Studio. We focus on the effects of COVID-19 on the tourism sector in Kenya. Our CGTN crew has just returned from the Maasai Mara, where the annual wildebeest migration is on. However, it is business as usual, or business as unusual, as tourism investors and locals try to make the best out of the unique event. This is a migration amid a contagion.
The Mara, a jewel of Kenya's tourism. It's a shared ecosystem with Tanzania's Serengeti National Park, whose wildlife is the pride of the East African region. So famous is the Mara Game Reserve that it attracts thousands of tourists from near and far. Its diverse wildlife, popular tourist attractions, and a welcoming local community make the Mara stand tall among its regional competitors. Apart from the big five, cheetahs, hyenas, servals, and bat-eared foxes are also found here. One of the Mara's most prized events is the annual wildebeest migration. It is a spectacle to behold. Around 1 million wildebeest and other migratory animals like zebra cross the Mara River from the Serengeti National Park into the Maasai Mara Game Reserve. They come in search of pasture and to mate. But with predators circling the scene, it is a life and death exercise. There are crocodiles in the water, lions, cheetahs, and even hyenas lie in wait on land. It is a journey of challenges and dangers. It is Mother Nature at one of her finest and most exhilarating moments. So phenomenal is the migration that it draws thousands of foreign and local tourists, raking in millions of dollars every year for the sector. Now, many locals, directly or indirectly, are dependent on tourism. Some foreigners too are here as workers or investors. Regardless of who benefits or how, this is the annual season for a windfall. Once again, the season is here and the Mara is the place to be. However, this year's migration comes at a time when Kenya, like the rest of the world, is battling the COVID-19 pandemic, a migration amid a contagion. Kenya reported its first case of COVID-19 on the 15th of March. Almost immediately, the country went into a partial lockdown. Coronavirus cases are still on the rise, now surpassing 30,000. It's clear the economy has not been spared, with tourism, one of Kenya's biggest foreign exchange earners, taking the hardest hit. Flight bans and border closures were implemented across the world to curb the spread of the virus, forcing Kenya's tourist hotspots to shut down or drastically scale down operations. The effects have been devastating. So hard are the times that Kenya's Tourism Cabinet Secretary could only lament about it. In the past month, restrictions have been relaxed, flights have resumed and hotels have reopened. However, unlike previous years, there are noticeably fewer foreign tourists in the Mara. Hit by the dwindling number of foreign tourists from the traditional markets of China, Europe, and the United States, Kenya is now looking inwards. It's turning to the local market. With special packages and reduced prices, the country is hoping to keep this vital sector afloat until the dark cloud of the coronavirus goes away. But for a local population that is already suffering the economic effects of COVID-19, how cheap is cheap? It's business unusual here at the Mara. Social distancing, hand washing, sanitizing, as well as the wearing of face masks are some of the measures being pushed by government, protocols that hotels must adhere to.
It just happened to be fortunate enough for us that COVID happened. Normally during this time, it's not very easy for us to get access to such places.
Pleasure to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Actually, before we came back, we had to follow the strict rules put by the Ministry of Health and the Kenyan government to combat the spread of the coronavirus. And we put measures, like when you checked in, you see that there was you wash your hands, you sanitize, we check your temperatures, and put on your masks.
Human-wildlife conflict is a thorny issue in these parts. The indigenous people of this land, the Maasai, are considered custodians of Kenya's wildlife. But when their livestock are attacked or their settlements destroyed by wild animals, the Maasai have fought back. Wild animals have been poisoned. This continues to be a source of tension between the local community, conservationists, and the government.
Human-wildlife conflict is a big issue here in the Mara, and it's a bit high normally when it's raining. When we have long grass in the reserve and in the conservancies, then you will have playing games going out to the community areas. And they take along with them predators. Elephants also try to find their way to other areas outside the national reserve. And they come in contact with people.
If you're looking to understand what's changed in the Mara due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the answer is in the silence. The rumbling of flights arriving and departing, the consistent hum of off-road vehicles have all been replaced by the sounds of nature in their untouched glory.
Yeah, it's very interesting, although, well, I mean, people affected in terms of, their livelihood. But in terms of nature and wildlife, I think they thrived because less disturbance. We have had cheetahs doing their hands very well without so many cameras.
A blessing for some, certainly, but the silence is a cause of concern for the local community whose livelihoods revolve around the presence of foreign and local tourists. The silence is a reality check that is now sinking in.
Immediately after lockdown have just came in, no international flight coming in. Mara had been a very, very terrible place to be. People are living like in a very terrible state. I mean, like they don't grow crops, so source of income was tourism, coming here and promoting them here.
As the sun sets in the Mara, only time can tell when it will rise again on global tourism. This is a sector that generates 9% of Africa's income, and with efforts to find a vaccine for the coronavirus in top gear, over 100 million jobs in the tourism and hospitality sector across the world are at risk.
And as we always mention, magical Kenya, and I'm in the majestic Mara, so guys, you're most welcome to come, visit us, enjoy. We say Tembea Kenya, and all the COVID protocols are in place.
As the cold occasioned by the coronavirus reigns globally, Kenyans and locally based foreigners are metaphorically chopping their own firewood just to keep warm. Many here are hoping for better days ahead. For hope is a good thing, and good things never die.
Maasai Mara, hakuna matata.
We've got your sports news coming up in just a moment. Here's a peek at the headline. We take a look at the increasing popularity of Teqball in South Africa.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Sport on Africa Live. We start in South Africa, where 11-a-side football remains the preferred version of the beautiful game. However, traditional football requires a field and 22 players, and that's why Teqball is starting to see huge growth, as 2 players and a tech table is all you need. This could very well become a popular alternative to the traditional version. CGTN CS Duplessis has more.
Teqball was invented in Hungary 6 years ago and is now gaining worldwide popularity. Played on a curved table using a football which has to be kept off the ground after 1 bounce on the table, the match consists of 3 sets with servers changing every 4 points and sets running up to 20 points. It tests not only the skill but also the wits of the players.